Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Ibn Marais. Our group will presenting about Malaysia financial crisis in 2008. Firstly, I will explain about the background of financial crisis. The financial crisis was occurred globally between 2007 and 2008. There are several events occurred that contribute to the financial crisis. It was started by the huge scale of borrowing from the borrowers to buy the properties during that time. The subprime borrowers who had high credit risk also allowed to make a loan, which caused the loans being default. The demand of properties rocketed until it reached the saturation point. In early 2006, the price reached the limit and fall drastically. High of interest rate could not be paid by the subprime borrowers, and many of them were declared bankrupt. The sign of crisis clearly shown by the collapse of Lehman Brothers, that were the fourth largest investment bank in US. During the crisis, Malaysia was not highly impacted on its financial sector. It was because Malaysia was in a strong financial position when facing the global crisis. It was supported by ample liquidity and effective regulatory governed by financial institutions. However, Malaysia was facing the economic crisis. It was impact on investment in Malaysia and also impact on small and medium enterprise that would contribute to the decline of GDP. It also affected in others like commodities, currencies, and export.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Muhammad Khairul Ahmad. For my part, I'm going to present factors that lead to financial crisis in Malaysia in 2008. Firstly, the input-driven growth model that relied on natural resources, cheap labor and primary production was not able to sustain long-term economic growth. This is referred from Economic Planning Unit 2020. The second one is foreign direct investment inflows have moderated compared to pre-crisis period, which is the foreign direct investment inflows into Malaysia average 5.2 billion between 1990 and 1997, but then it declined to an average 4.3 billion between 1998 and 2008. Then the third factor is there were fewer mega projects in the post-crisis period compared to the pre-crisis period, which is this is happened when Abdullah Ahmad Badawi took over as Prime Minister in 2003. The government scaled down, postponed or abandoned several mega projects to reduce its budget deficits. The next point is, which is the fourth factor, there is evidence that prolonged overinvestment that led to the AFC, which is Asia financial crisis, contributed to sluggish domestic investment in Malaysia after the crisis. Using the long-term series of aggregate domestic investment, Guimarães and Unteroberdoster 2006 found that there was overinvestment exceedingly over 10% of GDP for about 4 years prior to 1998. The last factor is account surplus implies that there is limited capacity in the economy to generate enough investment opportunities to absorb domestic savings. The persistent current account surplus after 1997 indicates that though the Malaysia economy was being driven by export sector, the domestic economy remained weak with an excess of savings over investment. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
So I will explain about the effect of Malaysia financial crisis to Malaysia. Malaysia was relatively unaffected by the financial turmoil in the first half of 2008, but it became worse in the second half of 2008 and in the first quarter of 2009. Real gross domestic product, as we can refer from the graph in the right side, grew only 0.1% year-on-year in the fourth quarter of 2008 and became worse when it reached negative growth of 6.2% in the first quarter of 2009. Next is Industrial Production Index or IPI of Malaysia. As you can refer from the graph in the left side, it compares the percentage change of the sector in January 2008 and January in 2009. It shows that the manufacturing sector affected the most compared to other sectors, which is manufacturing shows a decline of 26.3%, mining 5.8%, and electricity 12.5%. The decline in industrial production sector led to the decline in the share export. The share suffered its biggest drop in export since 1982, which is when in January 2009, the export dropped almost 28% in year-on-year term. Because of the crisis, the Malaysian ringgit has lost almost 6% of its value against the US dollar at the first quarter of 2009, from 3 ringgit 46 cent to 3 ringgit 69 cent. This decline in the value of Malaysian ringgit is primarily due to the decline demand in export and portfolio capital outflow of Malaysia. Malaysia's unemployment rate was relatively stable and low during this crisis compared to other countries. It only increased by 0.9% in the first quarter of 2009, which is when the crisis hit the hardest. This is mainly because of most employers eliminating shift work and overtime, and also reducing work days or salaries instead of resorting to retrenchment or laying off workers. That's all from me. I pass to my friend.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Sharul Najib bin Johari, metric number 1812827. I will present about the solutions on Malaysia financial crisis in 2008. On 4 November 2008, Malaysia government has carried out an expansionary fiscal policy. The main goal of this policy is to rise up the domestic demand, stimulate the economy, decrease or close the recession gap, and also reduce the unemployment rate. The government has introduced two fiscal stimulus packages amounting to 67 billion, roughly 10% of Malaysia's GDP in 2008 and 2009. As we can see here in Table 9, Malaysia is the second most aggressive in its policy-induced recovery programs among the Asian countries after Singapore. The first stimulus package is the injection of 7 billion, which aims at projects with high multiplier impact on the economy. It has been channeled to various ministries and agencies. The main purpose implementation of the first economic package is to maintain and support domestic economic activities, such as inspired private sector activities and ensuring the well-being of citizens in Malaysia. Other than the 7 billion stimulus package, Malaysia government also pursues some of the approaches. The approaches are the effectiveness of government expenditure increase, conducive environment for business and investments are provided, citizens' disposable income increase, and to strengthen nation's sustainable development. They also undertook measures to support private consumption, such as reducing the Employees Provident Fund contribution rate to 8% from 11%. The 7 billion stimulus package, which accounted for 1% of Malaysia's GDP, was criticized as too small. Then on March 2009, Malaysia government has announced the second stimulus package, which was more comprehensive and biggest in history at a massive of 60 billion. This package was almost 9% of Malaysia's GDP. Of this amount, 15 billion was in the form of fiscal injection, 25 billion for government guarantees of private loans and bonds, 10 million for government investment copying Khazanah Nasional to invest equity stakes in local projects with high multiplier effects, 7 billion for private finance initiative, and 3 billion for tax incentives. The main purpose of this package is to balance the declining of economic condition. One of the components in this package is to reduce the unemployment rate. In any event, recovery should not just be confined to the stimulus package. With the slowdown of inflation, there is more room for monetary policy to drive the economy by lowering the interest rates. Bank Negara Malaysia, the central bank, reduced the overnight policy rate 3 times by a total of 150 basis points between November 2008 and February 2009. The OPR is currently 2%, while the statutory reserve requirement has been reduced by 200 basis points to 1%.